Are you a financial advisor considering the Independent Registered Investment Advisor or RIA model and wondering where to start? Start with Schwab Advisor Services. Schwab has helped thousands evaluate the full range of options and can help you determine your best path forward. Navigate the big and small decisions by tapping into Schwab's decades worth of insights on what fuels RIA success. With Schwab Advisor Services, you have a custodian that will support you every step of the way. Start your journey today at advisorservices.schwab.com/PAPS.
Blog Talk Radio.
The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and we've got a great show for you tonight. We're going to be joined here in just a moment for another great discussion on the Coach's Corner panel. And then a little bit later on, I'm going to be joined by two individuals from golftrainingaids.com. Slight program change, though. Originally, John Diulis was going to be joining us. He's the president of golftrainingaids.com, and unfortunately, he had to back out last minute for personal reasons, but nevertheless, we've got a replacement, and Dane, Wiren, the general manager and head of new products, as well as Emily Faulkner, director of marketing and social media, is going to be joining us from golftrainingaids.com. So they'll be joining me a little bit later on in the show, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the products that they feature on the site and what's new and upcoming, and a few other nuggets as well, and hopefully we'll get some suggestions on what they think you should be looking at as for a good training aid. I'm going to join here, as I said, by the Coach's Corner panel here in just a moment, but in the meantime, let me remind everybody, of course, we are live every Thursday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. Central here on the blogtalkradio.com network. And for some reason, if you're not able to join us live and you want to tune into the broadcast at a later point, just go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live and just scroll down to the on-demand section, and you'll find it there in its entirety. Of course, we are live every Thursday, as I said, from 6 to 8 p.m. Central, but you can listen to the recorded version at any time after the show ends when it's convenient for you. So go there, and also you can check out any of the previously aired broadcasts as well. All right, I got one of the panelists here. The other one we're waiting to come on board. So I'm going to introduce both of them, and then I'll bring the one that's here out for to begin our discussion, and I'll keep an eye out for the other to round out the panel. All right, joining me on the panel tonight is Pete Buchanan. Pete's been teaching golf for now for 30-plus years. He's the founder and director of instruction of Plain Simple Golf LLC, which, of course, houses the Plain Simple Golf Circuit and Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace. He's been helping golfers of all levels focus on building a repeatable swing, and has become one of my favorites here on the Coach's Corner panel. Also joining on the panel, hopefully it'll be a little bit later, is James Kyle. He's a PGA professional and coach at the East Woodlands Lake Country Club. He's also been in 30 years plus. He began his journey as a professional golfer and coach. The incredible experiences James has had while improving his own swing, fitness training, and traveling, competing on mini tours and 2 PGA Tour qualifying schools, elevated his ability to provide incredible lessons for his clients. So I'm going to bring Pete out. Pete, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ted. It's good to be here.
I appreciate it. We'll keep an eye out for Kyle. So what we're going to talk about, and it may just be you and I tonight, I put together an article for, yes, it's not like we haven't done it before, right?
That's right.
But all kidding aside, as I've said so many times, and I was just telling you off air, I realize that, all of you guys are out in the lesson tee for many, many hours, and sometimes you just can't get back in time, and it's not a big deal. So we'll see what we can do here. So this was an article, Pete, that I put together. Actually, it's not really so much an article as a letter from the editor for an upcoming issue, in fact, the July-August issue of Golf Tips magazine, which has just gone to the designer now, and I thought it would make for an interesting discussion for us to have on the panel. It's something we really haven't we've touched on, but not really got into it in depth. So, and really, I'm going to start it off by just sort of making this a brief statement, and then we'll continue the discussion. So, the question really that you want to pose to a golfer is whether or not they're expecting too much. And what I mean by that is, are they able to manage the expectations of their game? So, for instance, I always recommend that a student takes a step back and really think about what you can reasonably expect from your game. And, you know, Pete, we've talked about this, I know, before on the show, where a lot of times people have unrealistic expectations. So what I want to do is I want to focus on some specific areas. And the first one is, you know, I've been teaching now for 25 plus years myself as a golf professional, and I've come across many different types of golfers. Most often I find that people expect to get something out of the game that is unrealistic, as I said. And I see golfers who play just a few times a year and expect to hit it like pros, while at the same time many of them barely even practice. What are your thoughts here? I mean, you've seen this as well. You know, you get somebody coming out to the lesson tee and, you know, maybe they play a few times a year, but their expectations are much higher. What's the conversation you're going to have with them?
Well, that's a great question. You know, the first thing I always like to do is remind them, first of all, at the level they play at right now. If they have a handicap, I'm going to look at it and say, for instance, if they're let's say somebody who, the last one I had this conversation was a 10. And so I just started to look through the scorecard with them, and I said, now let's look at this card, and if you want to play scratch or better, let's look at what you're going to have to do on these holes in order to do that, and how you're going to have to score, and the types of shots you're going to have to hit to make that happen. And so I get them to start to look at each hole and try to talk them through a round and see. Usually what happens is they're looking at that and say, I'm not sure I can do that. I said, well, I got news for you. You can't do that right now. And I said, you've got to devote more time in these specific areas, first of all, and then you've got to devote more time overall to your practice for you to be able to get down to that level. And I said, you know, those players that you're watching on TV do this for a living. And I said, if you took your own profession that you're in and gave yourself a handicap, you'd probably give yourself a pretty good one, or you'd probably be in another profession. So if you look at the time you devote to that, and now let's look at the time you're devoting to golf, well, let's see where our expectations have gotten a little bit out of kilter here. So I think that's usually where I'll start to go with the conversation and see how it goes from there.
Yeah, and that's a really great point because, again, you want to look at the results that the player has made, and obviously the best place to start is on their scorecard. You know, what do the holes look like? How many pars have they made? Have they made any birdies or how many bogeys they've made? And then you start isolating it hole by hole and looking at it. And there, quite often you can find many strokes. And I find, you know, really where most people get into trouble is even on par fives. You'd think most people on par fives are going to at least score a par. They may not birdie it. They're certainly not going to eagle unless they're a strong player. But you think they're going to at least par. And I've seen some people come off not even a long par five with an 8. And, you know, I look at it and I say, okay, well, what are you doing here? And the first thing that they've done is right off the tee, they've lost a stroke or so. They've hit a bad tee shot. It's gone off into the woods or it's gone into an unplayable lie. So now they're shooting 3. So right off the gate, they're already behind the 8 ball, and they barely even got up the fairway. So I think you're exactly right. I think looking at where they can save some strokes, look at their scorecard, and break it down and find ways that they can in areas. If it's their short game that's really letting them down, okay, that's where we're going to focus on. If it's a matter of them not getting the ball in position, then we're going to look at, okay, what do we need to do to get it in position? It may be their ball striking. It may be just the fact that they're trying too hard to hit it. I see a lot of players out there just trying to murder the ball, and it's going all over the place. So I think that's a great point that you raise, and I think that you have to really isolate and look at what the results of their round is, and then sort of work backwards from there. So some great points there. I did get a message, by the way, from James, and he's running a little bit behind. Hopefully he'll be able to join us. So we'll continue on, you and I. So here's something else, Pete, that I think that we often see, and again, I think we can relate as golf professionals. At the first sign of a bad shot, they lose their temper. And the round is likely going downhill from there. So if most golfers learn to manage their expectations, I think they would enjoy the game more and probably play much better. And that's the thing is, right away, we all hit bad shots, right, Pete? But right away, they've turned it into a situation that when they hit a bad shot, now emotions start coming and they're angry, they're frustrated, and they're bringing it in. Give us some thoughts here. Again, I know you've seen this many times. What do you, again, let's go to the discussion. What discussion are we having with the player that you start seeing these signs?
Well, you have to let them know that one shot's not going to kill the round. I mean, you can have a bad shot off the tee and make a 30-footer and you just made up for it. So you can't let one shot get to you if you're going to shoot. If you got 85 shots today, you can't let one of those 85 get you down. I mean, that's just going to have to be your expectation is that, you're going to have some shots that aren't going to be as good. And if I'm on the golf course with them, if they hit a bad tee shot, then I'll hit mine over where they just hit theirs. That's all right. Let's go. Mm-hmm. Let's see what we can do from here. And they'll say, well, why'd you hit it over there? I said, well, I don't know. You hit it over there. I just figured I'd try to play it from where you're at. And let's see what scores we can make from here. And then they look at it like, I can make a par from here. I said, sure you can. Yeah. It's that old adage that, you don't have to write 5 on the card until after you spent 4. So you have to, you don't make a 5 until the 4th shot's done. So you have to, get your expectation of what you're trying to do on each hole. But I think the point is right that you said if their expectations are in check, then those shots won't bother them as much. But I think and a lot of times they're gonna look. They always look towards the bad shots. When they finish around and say, "Hey, how'd you do today?" and they're like, "Oh man, I missed the putt on this one and that one." That they never remember the good ones. They always remember the bad ones. And so, you got to get them to understand there's some good shots out there too that you need to be aware of, because those are what's going to help you get those scores intact and keep you going throughout the round.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, more often than not, obviously there's some exceptions to the rule, but more often than not, they've hit a lot of really good shots. But that really bad drive or that missed putt that was an opportunity for a birdie, that's what they're focusing on. When they're back in the clubhouse and they're having a bite to eat or a drink after the round with the rest of the guys, the first thing they're going to as they're looking through the scorecard is they're remembering those bad shots. And the unfortunate part is when it comes time to the next time they're playing, they're still remembering those bad shots. And
yes, they are.
They don't, right? They don't see, right, exactly. They don't seem to be willing to let it go. And, that's really what differentiates the pros from the amateurs, is it's not just, because one can hit the ball better. Obviously there's an advantage. If you're striking the ball well, that gives you confidence. And obviously if you're not, you're going to lack that confidence. But I've seen some of the best players in the world. I've watched Tiger, I've watched Jack, hit some really bad shots and still come out with a par. I've even seen Tiger in some cases, you thought there's no way in heck is he going to make par, and he made a birdie after hitting a bad tee shot because he was able to recover from what happened. Now, some situations you may not be able to recover from as easily. But again, like you said, if you haven't already shot the first 4, don't put 5 down on your scorecard yet. You still got another opportunity. And people just don't seem to get that. The other point, the next point I want to talk about is we know that golf is probably by far one of the hardest games. It is difficult. There's no doubt. So given that understanding, why should our expectations be high if, as I mentioned at the very beginning, if your commitment to practice and play is nominal? So, if you're not playing very much and you're not even practicing, then why are you down on yourself? Why are your expectations unrealistic? And, we see the best players, Pete, in the world practice on average somewhere around 8 hours a day. Now, obviously, they've got the wherewithal to do that, and I'm not suggesting that our listeners need to do that. But they, too, hit terrible shots. So why should you, the average, weekend warrior, expect anything more when you hit a bad shot? And the answer is your expectations are not reasonable. So this goes back into the practice. So if somebody doesn't play a lot, what are some options? If they're not playing, maybe they play once a month, let's say. We'll give it a little bit more. If you're playing once or twice a year, then, there's no point in listening to this conversation. But if you're playing at least once a month, there are things that you can do that don't take a lot of time that can help out. What are some suggestions? If you're going to encourage somebody to practice, what are you going to encourage them to practice? It's going to help maybe make things a little bit better for them.
Well, the first thing I'd look at is a short game. I mean, you got to spend some time at it because that's where you're going to score, especially putting, chipping, and pitching. What was the old stats? Probably 70% of the shots you play are under 80 yards. And so you've got to get to where you can play those shots first. That's where I'd suggest they go, even if it's just putting. Putting can save them, a ton of strokes right off the bat. So the short game would be the first place I'd start. And then the second place I would be is, put the ball off the tee in play. And it doesn't have to be the driver all the time. Just get it in play.
Right.
Go out and play around, and I want you to hit 6 irons off every tee box on all the par 4s and 5s. I'll say, well, wait a minute. I said, just practice playing from the fairway for a little bit and see how well you do. Give yourself a chance to score first, but make sure that you've practiced those short ones so you have the ability to get it in the hole once you get to that point. So those short shots are going to be very, very important. And I know for me, if somebody said, hey, you're going to go play in a tournament next week, I said, man, I'm going to get out there and I'll spend 90% of my time under 50 yards because that's where I'm going to need it. Because I could pick some lofted clubs to get me around the other shots. But it's around the greens where, I'm going to struggle because I haven't done it very often. And so even someone's at our level that, hasn't, if we haven't played a lot, the first thing that's going to go away is the short shots. So those should always be practiced, for sure.
I can remember, and actually I had him on a guest, and I mentioned this when he was on the show, but Wally Armstrong years ago was on the Golf Channel. And I've actually mentioned this besides when he was on. And he went around, played 3 holes, a par 3, par 4, par 5. And he went around with nothing but a 7-iron, a pitching wedge, and a putter, and ended up shooting 1 under par. Now, that just goes to show you that it's really, as you pointed out, it's about keeping it in play and not necessarily the long game. Now, we always hear, and it's exciting to watch, we always hear, especially on the men's tour, and now even in some instances in the ladies' tour, we're seeing some big bombers. So we're seeing some really long shots. And the courses certainly have gotten longer over the years, and it does give you some advantage if you're accurate. But you can hit it 300 yards, and if you're not accurate off the tee, that 300 yards doesn't mean a hill of beans. And this is the problem that the average golfer doesn't seem to comprehend. And again, I would rather, as you suggest, I would rather than maybe hit a 6-iron off the tee just to keep it in play and play from the fairway. I would much rather be playing from the fairway, even if I'm 20, 30, 40 yards back from where I think I should be, if I had to hit it with my driver, or maybe even 50 yards back, but have a good lie and a good opportunity. And yeah, I might take an extra shot getting it to the green, but I'm going to set myself up for more opportunities over the course of 18 holes. And that's really what it's about. It becomes strategy. And again, this is something that a lot of folks out there just don't seem to get. And I'll be honest, I mentioned to you off air that I'm tomorrow I'm heading up to Pinehurst for a short little golf junket, if you will. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to play smart. I mean, obviously I can play a good ball, but I'm going to play smart. I'm going to go up there because I've never played at Pinehurst before, so I'm not used to, other than what I've seen on TV, I'm not used to the courses and that, and I'm going to go up there and I'm going to play smart. So if it means, hey, if the driver's not working to the best of my ability that day, then I'm going to dial it back and maybe hit a hybrid off the tee. I just want to get it in play. So this is something that I think I really want the amateur golfers out there to take note is you don't always have to bomb it out there. The smarter play is just to keep it in play. The next one also, I think something that they should consider about their game is you are not the same player on the range that you are on the golf course. And why? Well, because there's no pressure on the range. So don't be the golfers that I don't understand, why I played so badly. I was hitting the ball pretty great on the range. And that's a phrase we hear all the time, Pete, is we get so many golfers out there that are hitting pretty good on the range, and then they get out in the golf course, and it's like, what happened to the guy that was, 10 minutes ago? What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. As you said, there's no consequence on the range because you got 50 more sitting there. You can hit another one. And so I think what you need to do in your range sessions is you need to play some holes while you're practicing and say, I'm going to hit a driver here and I'm going to pick out a boundaries that's going to give me a fairway, and I'm just going to take this one ball and I'm going to hit it and see where I end up. And then from that position, okay, this is my favorite par 4. Now I'm 150 yards out. I've got to hit this club. And then, work your way that way. Put a little bit of, extra pressure on yourself on the range, just a little bit, and, pick some boundaries and, try to hit the ball within those. But you also have to remember, too, to look at the course when you're playing. And I think what can make them a little bit better players is it's funny that we as professionals don't see nearly as much as the amateurs see when they play. And what I mean by that is I'll get up on a par 4 and I'm looking where I'm trying to drive it in the fairway, and all I hear are my amateur playing partner says, "Man, look at that water over there." And I'll turn to him and say, "What water? What are you talking about?" And they'll say, "You don't see that lake over there?" I said, "No, it doesn't. It's irrelevant on this hole because I'm not going to hit it in there. I don't even see it." And so I think, looking at the holes that they play in, looking at, trying to take the trouble out, just by how you visualize it, or if there's a bunker that you can reach with a driver, why don't you hit a 3-wood or a hybrid so you don't get in it? Mm-hmm. When I used to play a lot of tournament golf, I was best into the greens with a 6, 7, and 8 iron. So I tried to drive it off the tee to leave me one of those in. So there were a lot of times I was hitting a long iron off the tee, and they're like, "What are you doing that for?" I said, "Well, if I hit driver, I'm too close, and I'm not as good with those irons. So I'd rather back up to play to my strengths." So I think, that's another thing, too, getting them to understand how to play to their strengths. And, it's avoiding your weaknesses when you play. If you can leave yourself in a position that takes one of your weak shots out of there, then do that. Put the ball, especially, you're talking about par 5s before. I see it so often, they want to bomb it as close to the green as they can, and now they're left with a 50-yard pitch shot, and they've just taken 2 full mighty whacks at it to try to get it that far down there, and they have no idea how to finesse a 50-yard shot, so they end up taking an 8 when they're 50 yards off the green and 2. So you have to look at those types of shots and try to help yourself out.
Yeah, exactly, and this is what we see so often. Again, it goes to position. The other thing is, we see, and this has been talked about for eons in golf, but, we've got a lot of slicers out there. It's just a matter of, we work with them, we try to help them out, but there's some people that just don't get it. And one thing I always see is they'll have maybe a 25-yard slice, and I'll say, "Why are you teeing up on the left-hand side of the tee box? Why aren't you not teeing on the right-hand side so that you're playing towards the left and allowing for that slice or that fade even in some cases? Use the whole fairway. If you're putting it in the middle of the tee box or to the left side of the tee box and you're a slicer of the ball and you're aiming at the center of the fairway because you think that's where I want my ball to go, well, you've now taken, if it's a 40-yard wide fairway, you've taken 20 yards out. So now you've got 20 yards of target to hit. And it might seem like a lot, but for someone that slices it 25 yards, that doesn't give you a lot of options. So for me, I always encourage, and I'm sure you do the same, I encourage, depending on the shots that my players are dealing with, is I have them take those factors out by teeing it up on the right side of the tee box. That's going to give them the greatest chance. Why not give your chance 40 yards for your ball to land as opposed to 20 or 25? Your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. That's again going into playing into what you have. I can remember my dad playing was a career 14, and I could never beat him as a 14 because that rascal would make 9 pars on the 9 holes I had to give him strokes on. So for me to make 9 birdies was impossible. But he had that patented 20-yard fade, and boy, he'd go to the right side of the tee box every time, and he'd tee it up, and he'd just knock it left and let it fade right back in the fairway. And so he just did that, time and time again. So he knew how to play that. So it's going back to playing with what you have and understanding what you have and using that to the best of your ability to get you around the golf course. And, I think you're right. When you're looking at strategy, most players, and I know what happens to me when I go out for, a playing lesson, they're really surprised at the things that I'm telling them, because they think I'm going to, help them with their swing and, keep them from slicing out there. And that's not what I'm out there for. I said, I'm out here to show you with what you have right now. I'm going to show you how best to play the golf course. I'm not going to try to fix it because I don't have time to fix your slice out here on the golf course. There's no time. I need repetition so on the range we can get that done. But out here, you're curving it 50 yards right, so we're going to set it up so that ball starts 50 yards left and ends up back in the fairway. That's just what we're going to do today. But I'm going to show you how best to play with what you have and then help you practice to, alleviate that when you practice. But on the golf course, and I'm sure you find it as well as I do. They're so surprised with the things I'm looking at and what I'm trying to tell them and how to play a hole. And like, man, I never even thought of playing this hole this way. I said, well, that's why you keep making 8s on it. Yeah, that's right. So, you've got to understand how to use what you have to the best for each hole that you're playing. So I think that's something that can really help them to lower their scores.
I had a student, just to give you an example, a number of years ago, who we went out for a playing lesson, and he hit his drive on a severe downslope. This particular hole had a downslope. And he came right out and he said, I'm not real good at hitting, and he was trying to go for the green. He was a pretty decent player, but certain things he just was not good at, and one of them was hitting when the ball was on a downslope. So he's pulling out one of his longer clubs, and he's trying to go for the green. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, you just got finished telling me you're not good at hitting on the downslope. So why are you going to try to go for it? It just as you said, we're not going to go through the whole setup and what you need to do and all that when you haven't had a chance to practice it. I said, you're going to end up hitting behind the ball or thinning it or what have you because you haven't prepared for it. So I said, why don't you do something instead of going with a longer club, go with a little bit shorter club like a 7 or even an 8 iron and advance the ball a little further down the fairway. You might have to go in with a third shot as opposed to second shot, but at least you're going to be in play and you're not going to end up losing really that much yardage. And I said, you're also going to de-loft it a little bit because you're going downhill now, so it's going to give you some good run and some good roll. And, much like in your case, they kind of think, well, I don't understand why are we not doing it this way here? And it's because we don't have time. In a playing lesson, it's there to see what they're working, see what their situation is and work with what they have. And then let's take what we examined on the golf course and now go back to the range and say, okay, here's this situation, here's this scenario. Now we can work on some of these things under, ideal circumstances, as opposed to trying to repair something out in a playing lesson. And again, it goes to for the player to really understand their game. And once they understand their game and what tools they're taking to the golf course that particular day, once they understand which tool to take out of the toolbox at any given time, their rounds go so much better. And if they're flailing and waffling all over the place, they're never going to improve. And that's just fact. So it's just interesting. I've had similar situations, as I'm sure as you have, where people are just not in their comfort zone and they're still trying to pull off some funky shot that's just not going to happen because they haven't practiced it. And it just does not make sense, the old definition of insanity. So it seems to apply in this particular case. So what can you do to change things around? I think the first step is, Pete, is for them to really think long and hard about what kind of practice they're willing to put in. So if you don't have the time or desire, as we said, and you mentioned about really working on your game, they just can't expect to get out there and light it up on the golf course. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. And you are right. I mean, golf is, I've always said I don't think it's very difficult to hit a golf ball and make some good contact, but it's hard to score. There's a lot of things that go into scoring in golf. And so it's much more difficult to score because now you've got different situations. And so you have to be able to understand those situations and how they fit what you do in order to best get into making the scores that you can make. I always used to say to all the folks, I said, a double bogey, which is 2 over what you normally shoot, is a bad shot followed by a dumb one. And so you just have to make sure that, if you hit a bad shot, what's the recovery, just like you said. And a lot of times it's not what they think, but it's just putting the ball back in play, and they're amazed at how well they can play from there. But, yeah, I mean, the expectation of what you can do based on, especially nowadays when you follow, I've had the opportunity to work with some pretty high-level players, and when you follow what they do on a daily basis, from how much golf practice they do, how much they work out, how they eat, how they conduct themselves, I mean, it's so different from what everybody else is doing. So to think you can, you're sitting at a 10 and all of a sudden, tomorrow you're going to be a tour player, there's some reality in there that is going to need to bump into you a few times before you're going to be able to get down that road. So, and it's just they do it and they're so fit, they're so strong. And I had a great conversation with a guy last night. I said, you're making moves now that a tour player makes, but you just can't do it at their speed. They can do it at, they can swing that golf club 20 miles an hour faster than you can. It's not that you can't make the same movements, but because this is their living and this is what they do all the time, they're going to be able to do it at a faster rate. And so they're going to drive it further. It's just different. But you don't have the time to get to that point right now. But let's enjoy where you are, because you can hit straight, solid shots and understand what those shots can do for you. And then by taking the short game on, you can get to where you can really score really well out there. I think they just have to understand, what it really takes to be that type of player. I mean, it takes a lot,
Yeah. And and it's like I said, sorry, go ahead.
Well, the other thing I was going to say, you ought to have all the knowledge I have and still miss shots. You want to talk about frustrating. Mm-hmm. You don't get to get frustrated because I have all this knowledge and I still miss hit them. So you haven't spent enough time to get frustrated, so you can't get frustrated with your shots. Right.
I had another student years ago when I was still back up in Canada, and he played hockey as a junior and that, and he couldn't understand why his golf game wasn't that good. He said, I've always been pretty athletic and played hockey and stuff. And I said to him one day, and I knew him well enough to say this, I said, I think you played a few times without your helmet, didn't you? And because he couldn't understand, he couldn't understand. Yeah. And I said, I think you got hit a few times without your helmet. And, but the point that I was trying to make is that they don't stop and think. They get out there and like I said, they get out in the driving range and they'll, hit a few good shots and they think, okay, great. I'm really striping them well out here on the driving range. Now I'm going to go out on the golf course. And then it's like, the old saying, the wheels fall off the bus, and they don't get it. And it's because they're not, they're taking their time on the range. They're thinking about, they're strategizing what they're going to do. Okay, I'm aiming at this target over here. That's it. But when they get out on the golf course, they got this wide open fairway, and instead of going back to that target, Nicklaus always talked about, you never heard Nicklaus talk about, well, I'm going to work on my ball striking technique. He always said, I'm going to warm up, and I'm going to think about where I want to position, what position I want to get into. if you ever hear him explain a hole, he'll always talk about, I wanted to leave myself such and such, or I wanted to put myself in that position here. And it was always about, it was a thought process, and it was about strategy. You never heard him, even at the beginning of the season, he said, in Golf My Way, he talked about how at the beginning of the season he went out there, and it was really a warm-up, and it was just a feel and a practice session. But it wasn't about, necessarily technique or that. And I'm sure he, over the years, had to tweak a few things here and there. But ideally, what he was doing was warming up, trying to get the feel back in his swing, because he, back in his prime, they weren't playing all year round, so they had several months off. And so he needed to sort of have that warm-up again. But what he was really thinking about more often than not was how he was going to play specific holes, what his strategy was going to be. He knew he could hit the ball well, and he knew there was going to be some shots that he may struggle with from here. He was not, people are probably surprised at this, but he certainly was a phenomenal putter, but his wedge game was certainly not among the best at that time out in the PGA Tour, and he acknowledged that. Even his bunker play was not the best. But it was certainly better than probably most amateurs. But that's what he was focusing on, is he was focusing on the strategy, how he was going to play that hole, and overall that particular golf course. And some courses fit his eye, other courses didn't. And when courses didn't fit his eye, then he played a different strategy. He knew that his chances of birdieing that hole are a lot less likely, so that he would play for par. In some cases, I've even heard him say he played for bogey, because he knew that there was a chance he could come away with a lot worse. And if a par happened, great. And if something else happened, even better. So getting back to our amateurs here. So here's a good example. You kind of touched on this a little bit. So if you're a 25 handicap, let's say as an example, you're unlikely to move to a 10 within a couple of months. You might be chasing that 85, let's say, every time you're out there, but it's not going to happen until you address the parts of your game that require you to get to that level. So improving your scoring, as we just talked about, is a gradual process that requires many mental and physical breakthroughs. So I know you've already touched on this a little bit, but maybe you can expand on it more. So when we hear students coming up and saying, I'm about a 20, 25 right now, and I want to get down to a 10, by the end of the summer, it's not necessarily that it's impossible, but it's not likely, based on most of the people, and forget some of the better players that we deal with, it's not likely going to happen because most of the amateurs that we deal with don't want to put the time and effort in. So what have they got to do? If they really want to knock their game down from a 25 to a 10, let's say by the end of this summer, what is it they're going to have to do?
Well, first and foremost, they're going to have a clear understanding of cause and effect and why they do what they do. That way, when they're practicing, they're not spending time guessing. They're understanding exactly why they hit the shot they hit, the road to then correct it. So that way they're always working towards correct instead of fighting it incorrect. And that's where I think most of the amateurs are at. They fight it incorrect, so they go to the range and then they get miles away from where they're supposed to be because they don't have any idea how to get themselves, in the right place. So I think, first of all, they have to have a very, very good understanding of why they do what they do. And then they have to seriously look at their rounds, as you talked about before, and on that scorecard, and, where's the downfall? Why are you making double bogeys on these particular holes? What part of your game is causing that to happen? And ironically enough, it's not as much off the tee as they think. If they drive one out of bounds, I get it. If they drive one in the water, that's understandable. But for the most part, it's approach shots into the greens, and then from there, not being able to capitalize. And, they miss the green to the right. They take 2 pitches, 1 chip, and 3 putts, and they say, man, if I just drove it better, I wouldn't make an 8. No, that's
right.
You didn't look at it. Like you said before, let me bonk you with the 7-iron to wake you up a little bit and say, now hold on. You had 1 drive in the fairway, 1 drive 50 yards short of the green, and you made an 8. So I don't think it was the first 2. But, they don't see it that way. Because, if I could drive it 50 yards further, I'd be so much better. Not necessarily. That ball you just hit that sliced 30 yards and ended up in the right rough, that would have been in the, 50 yards further right over there. So, again, I think it's if they could just, take the time to really look at their game and understand it, and then, be able to start to work and play the course to best fit what they do, I think that's where they have to start. But I think, first of all, having a clear understanding of why you do what you do, and then, you know, I'm always going to go back to, you got to have a short game. You just can't score without it. It's just not going to, it's just not possible. So you've got to be able to do chip and pitch and putt. And, you know, those are going to be, you know, really adamant in order for you to be able to score.
Yeah, and, you know, you're going to have some good and bad holes. That's just inevitable. You're going to have some good and bad shots. That's also inevitable. And it doesn't matter, you know, what level of player you are, you're going to have one or both of those. And I think the sooner you accept that and hopefully learn from whatever, you know, mistake may have happened on that, whether it was a bad shot, what caused the shot. And again, you don't have to isolate it now. You know, you can do it at the end of the round when you're sitting there and can reflect on things a little bit better. You don't want to do it during the round. You want to move on to the next shot because you can't change the past. The future hasn't happened yet. You only have now. So you want to make sure that whatever you do, that you learn from it. So you make a mental note, or you put a little note on the card there and say, okay, or circle that hole and say, okay, I want to deal with that a little bit later when I'm together with my coach, and we can talk about this bad hole and what happened here. So, you know, I look at this to sort of summarize things. Really what we're talking about is, first and foremost, you want to enjoy your rounds. And if you're caught up in anxiety and frustration because you're not playing the way you would like to play, and you're not making adjustments, in other words, you know, as we talked about earlier, if you're slicing the ball, you play for that slice. Don't try to fix things out in the range. It's a great game, and it's a great opportunity to get away from everything and spend some time outdoors. So enjoy those rounds, and then analyze things after when you're off the golf course. And as I said, maybe make some notes while it's still fresh in your mind, and then go have that discussion with your professional. And I think, obviously, first and foremost, just take a hard look at your game and really think about if you're willing to put in the work to get better, right, Pete? Because, I mean, if they're not willing to take a hard look and say, okay, I want to get from that 25 to 10, but, you know, I don't know what my commitment level is going to be, then you're really talking nonsense, in my opinion. What do you think?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, and, you know, just looking at a 25 to a 10, too, going back to the scorecard and explaining to them, you know, to go from 25 to 10, you know, these particular shots that you're playing are going to have to improve, you know, and then if you're going to be a 10, you know, there's going to be so many holes that if you miss the green, you got to get it up and down. It's paramount. You have to get this up and down. Yep. How many times have you done that as 25? Well, not very often. I said, well, those are things you have to look at. So, yeah, I think, you know, that it's sometimes tough to swallow that pill, I guess, to accept the fact that, you know, you're going to have to practice if you really want to get better. It just doesn't happen overnight. Golf is one of the most unique games in the world that, you know, you have to put the time in order to get to where you want to be. And, you know, I just don't think they understand how much time that takes. And if they're not willing to put that time in, then you have to accept where you are. But even with that, okay, accept the level you're at, but let's go out and show you how to best play with that level. Because there's some things out on the golf course that you can do that are going to make you better than where you are now. But you have to learn how to play within what you have. And you also have to remember, too, your handicap is when you play your best rounds. It's not your worst rounds. It's the average of your best rounds. You know, so, you know, they get out there and they don't quite shoot their handicap on a day. I say, well, wait a minute, you only one off it. That's pretty good. That's like me shooting one over. That's pretty good.
Right.
You know, that's what those are your best rounds. You know, so you got to understand, you know, what that handicap means too. But yeah, I think you've nailed it on the head. I mean, the expectation is just over the moon, and you have to bring that to some reality. You know, you got to be realistic in what you're doing.
You know, and I think too, for a lot of players, as we've said, they focus on the physical part of their game, and really there's a lot of emotional invested in how you play as well. and you bring a lot of anxiety. I mean, I see people coming all the time bring a lot of anxiety to the golf course because they're thinking about the past. They're thinking about bad shots before. And, something else I wanted to add here, too, that really should be mentioned is, with today's technology, there are so many great apps and process out there that allow you to actually track and monitor various different shots. So, for instance, your stats, you can now monitor that while you're playing with really doing very little. Most of them now have devices in that either attach to the golf club or what have you, and will actually monitor certain things. So now at the end of your round, you've got this nice digital imprint, if you will, of how your round went, how many putts you made, how many times, how many greens in regulation. So now you can go back and, as you said a moment ago, with that 25 to 10 handicap, they're trying to inch down there. Now in real time, you can see what area specifically that you're struggling with. If you're three putting a lot of your greens, there's a way you could probably save many strokes by working on your putting. And
no question.
And so with a lot of these apps that are available out there now, you can gather that information, and the majority of them, I won't say all of them, but the majority of them now take it a step further, and you can actually, if you're working with a coach or a teacher professional, they can actually get access to that information in real time as well, so that the next time you get together with them for your next lesson, you can review some of that. They've already got it. They can actually, more often than not, they've probably already reviewed. You can send them a quick message and say, hey, I just played this Saturday. Here's my, you've got my stats. When we get together next Tuesday, we can talk about my round. And most coaches are going to do that because they want to see where you're flailing, because you look pretty good when you're with them on the lesson tee, but then when you're going off playing by yourself, it's like everything's gone out the wind. So the other thing, too, is, Pete, is every round is a chance to elevate your game. So certainly don't expect greatness each time you play because it's not going to happen. You can certainly play well, and you have opportunities to score well and do well, but there's going to be some ups and downs, as we've said. Unrealistic expectations are also a golfer's worst enemy, and that's really what we're talking about here. We've seen this so many times, with students throughout the year, that they just come out there each season. I know it's going to happen again this season. They're all going to come out, and they're going to get out to the range. They're going to hit some good balls after they warm up for a little bit, and they're going to get out in the golf course, and it's going to fall apart, and they're not going to understand why. But meanwhile, for the last several months, they've been sitting, in the lazy boy chair or on the couch watching something else or doing some other activity, and they haven't put any effort into the game, and they can't figure out why they haven't improved from last year. Because last year they finished pretty good, right?
Yeah. Yep. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's hard sometimes, I think, especially early on when they're first coming out, because they haven't done a whole lot. And sometimes, they come out of the gate and they play pretty well. But, it doesn't last. And I usually say, well, it doesn't last because now you start thinking about it, and now it all goes to south and sideways. But you have to think about the right things, because in talking about just hitting golf balls, I was talking to some of my young juniors who are getting pretty good, and they said, well, what's the difference between, our game and your game? And I said, quite honestly, about 3 million balls. And I'm not being crazy here. I said, when I was a kid your age, you see these baskets, the largest basket, I used to hit 6 of those a day.
Yep.
And they're like, you got to be kidding me. I said, no. I wanted to be the best player I could be, so I figured I better practice, because that's the only way I was going to get there. I had to make sure that everything I did on the golf course was second nature. So I didn't have to think about it. So I had to pound enough balls so I didn't have to think about what I was doing anymore. And so I think that's where I think that the misconnect sometimes is they don't realize just how much time they have to put into it. Because some of the other sports, team sports they play, they can get pretty good, but, somebody else can make an error and you score. Well, that doesn't happen in golf. You make an error, it's your own fault. So it's a little bit different scenario to put them in, but I think you're right. It's a tough thing to do sometimes, but I think overall, with just the so small percentage of players that can really break 80 in this game, they just have to really sit back and think, where are you, what are you doing, and then if they can evaluate, their own individual games, and then be able to see why and where, they're going off on the scoring. I think that'll help ease it a little bit, but I think it'll also help them to understand where they have to practice.
And on the other side of the spectrum, Pete, is we see also a lot of golfers who do play a lot of golf, who do practice a lot, and still don't seem to improve, and again, get frustrated. They can't understand why they're not getting better. And I look at what they're doing, and they're practicing all of the mistakes. They're not, they're practicing those same mistakes. So you can practice them 100 times, but you're not going to improve until you isolate what the problems are. If it's an impact, if the club face is not squaring up an impact, then we have to take a look at that. If you're coming out of posture all the time, then we have to take a look at that. There's a variety of different things, as you said, cause and effect. And I've seen people that go through all season long, and they'll just play and play and play and play, and they can fudge it a little bit, but they never really truly improve. And with as much practice and playing, they should be out in the Champions Tour. But they're practicing all the wrong things, and they're not really practicing with the purpose. They're just out there practicing, and they're playing too, which is good. And some of them can, finagle, a bad shot here and there, or they can, come out of the woods a little easier because they haven't been practicing that. But there's still a lot of mistakes that they're making throughout their golf swing or their game in general that could be improved upon. So, those types we want to refocus, not necessarily change everything, but find the areas that they're working on or that they're utilizing that are not working for them, and let's remove them. Let's replace it with something that's going to give them a better opportunity. Your final thoughts on that?
Oh, I think you just hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly it. You have to practice the right way. And as I said before, you have to work towards correct. But you got to understand where that is. And most people don't understand where it is. But it's not only in a correct impact, but it's also in the correct application of shots. Around the green, what type of shots are you trying to hit? And I like to get them around the greens, and right before they hit, I said, what are you trying to do here? And they said, what do you mean? I said, what are you trying to do? What type of shot are you trying to hit? Explain to me what your ball should do. If your ball could talk to me, what's it going to tell me it's going to do to go to the hole? And then they're like, I never thought of it that way. I said, well, You got to start to picture what you're doing. So that becomes a more positive way to practice, so you can look at what shots are going on and understand, there's a variety of things you can do. But I think also too, it boils down to, just bad practice habits.
Yes.
If I'm really good with my short clubs, so I'm going to spend the whole time hitting those. Well, it's not going to do you any good. If there's a club in your bag that doesn't work, get it out and let's figure out why it doesn't work. And in some cases, let's just take that club out because that club's never going to work. Just based on what you're doing. There's some, as I've always said, there's a lot of clubs that are difficult to hit, and some are more difficult than others. So you can avoid it that way too. But I think it's. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and replace it with something that does work. You've got 14 clubs in the bag. So, if a 3, 4, or 5 iron isn't working for you, replace those clubs with something that does. Maybe some hybrids, or maybe throw an extra wedge in there. Throw a gap wedge in if you don't have a gap wedge. Fill it. You can use those 14 clubs if need be, but find clubs that are going to benefit you and remove clubs that are not. If you're not confident, if you're not an accomplished player, then having clubs in your bag that are hard to hit or difficult to hit makes no sense just because it's part of the set. Make a new set, and that's where your pro can help you.
Right, and I think too, where they really need to gap the yardages for their game, are from 6-iron on down to the wedges, not the other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They'd be better off getting more wedges in their bag to play more shots around the green than, a 3 and a 5 wood. I don't fit many 3 woods anymore because, for a lot of the amateur players, they're just too hard to hit, off the fairways. And, so they'd be better off going driver, going hybrids, and then working on down and putting more wedges in their bag. They're going to play better that way. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. There's some clubs in there, get them out of there. They're just too hard to hit. Some people would be better off, using a 15-degree lofty club to drive with. It's going to be easier.
Exactly. Yep, get it in fairway, and it's all about position. And again, you can avoid the trouble by not focusing on the trouble and focusing on where do you want the ball to go. And again, even if you're not a great player, even if you're a slicer of the ball, if you want the ball to be in the fairway, then compensate by aiming appropriately. Starting on the right-hand side, if you're a slicer of the ball, on the right-hand tee box, and aim towards the left so that it'll slice or fade back into the fairway. Give yourself a bigger target to shoot for, instead of doing it the other way around and trying to finagle something. And again, we'll work on those problems when it's appropriate, but you're out playing today, so let's not work on those things now. Let's play with what you've got, and there's a lot of things that you can do to make it a more enjoyable round, and that's really what it's all about. I think when people start having more fun, they're more apt to want to get involved and practice appropriately. When they're not having fun, they're frustrated, and that's why you see people hanging their clubs up after a short period of time because they get frustrated, but it's because they don't stop to think that there's a better way to do things. Pete, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. Regrettably, James did send me a message. He wasn't able to make it. He was running a little bit late from the course and had a few personal things he needed to take care of, so he just sends his apologies. But I think you and I did a good job.
I think we did. We might have to go on the road. No, I'm just kidding. No.
Well, I am actually tomorrow morning to Pinehurst. So
yeah. Like I said, I'm heading to Dallas next week too. So we're both going to be out and about. But no, I think I think it was a great topic of conversation tonight. I think people listening would get a lot out of it for sure.
Yeah, I think so. It's just, and again, we want the expectations to be realistic. That's really what the whole conversation's about. I mean, there are a lot of different factors that we talked about, but really, ultimately, that's what we're saying is be realistic. If you're struggling with parts of your game that need to be worked on, then pick the appropriate time to work on that with your teacher professional or your coach, depending on the level that you're playing. But be realistic. If you're not playing very much golf, you're playing a couple times a year, or even just once a month. Don't expect to move mountains. You've got to put the effort in, and there's lots of ways with today's technology and things that you can do that you don't have to spend an hour out at the range. There's a lot of things that you can do. I mean, if this pandemic did nothing for us, it taught us that when you get really, really bored, you can be creative. So, there were a lot of people in their backyards that had not big backyards, but they found ways of working on their golf game. And I talked about this last week with my guest. Saw a lot of people putting up videos, so it can be done. You just have to put the effort in. Pete, I want to thank you for joining me tonight in Coach's Corner, and I'm going to give you a chance to reach out and let the folks know how they can best reach out to you.
You bet. Thanks again, Ted. It's always a pleasure to be on, and it's a great platform that you have, and it's helping a bunch of golfers. So I'm always thrilled to be on. But they can reach me at PeteBuchananGolf.com or StLouisGolfLessons.com. Either one of those will find me and get the information. And as I always say, send me a note. Let's start a conversation, and let's work toward getting your golf games better.
Sounds good. Pete, as always, I will see you next month here on Coach's Corner. Have a safe trip to Dallas, and we'll see what we can come up with for the next conversation here on Coach's Corner. But thanks, my friend. Have a good one, and have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Enjoy Pinehurst.
I will. Thanks. All right, Pete Buchanan joining me on the Coach's Corner panel. Again, my apologies, or rather his apologies, from my good friend James Kyle that he was regrettably not able to make it to the discussion tonight, but I think Pete and I, as I said, did a good job. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to introduce tonight's special guests. They should be coming along here momentarily. Here's a quick message from Golf Tips Magazine.
The following ad is sponsored by Golf Tips Magazine.
Are you tired of being short off the tee? And what about those 3 putts? Forget about it. It's time you got serious about your game. Golf Tips, the most in-depth magazine in the industry. For over 30 years, Golf Tips has delivered expert content such as the latest golf instruction from America's top pros, simple-to-follow practice and game improvement drills, fitness and mental game tips, equipment, training aids, accessory and apparel reviews, golf destinations and travel tips for every budget, and so much more. Don't miss a single issue. Go to golftipsmag.com and subscribe today.
All right, and don't forget, if you're tuning in live, obviously you found us here, but if you're tuning in a little bit later and you missed the first hour and you want to listen to it in its entirety, you can go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live after the show and just scroll down to the on-demand section, and you will see tonight's show in its entirety at that point. And you can also go through some of the previously aired shows and check them out as well in the on-demand section. Just a quick program note, as most of you follow the show know that I also do another show Tuesday mornings called The Women of Golf with my good friend and co-host, LPGA professional and Legends Tour player Cindy Miller. Next Tuesday, because I am, as I've mentioned a couple times, going to be in Pinehurst this weekend and won't be coming back until next week. There will not be a Tuesday show next week, but my regular Thursday show will be here on Golf Talk Live. So I will be doing a show next Thursday when I come home, but the Tuesday show will be canceled and will be picked up the following week, which I believe is the 17th, is the Tuesday. So just keep that in mind. But you can also go to that link. It's blogtalkradio.com/Women of Golf, and you can go there and scroll down to the on-demand section and listen to the previously aired programs as well in their entirety. There, all the recorded versions are there, so you can do that while you wait for us to come back live. All right, I'm excited to be joined by tonight's special guest. And again, a quick program note that John Diulis was not, the president of golftrainingaids.com, was not able to join us tonight, but not to worry. I've got a couple of great guests that are going to be coming on. First up is Dane Wiren. He's the general manager and head of new products. Is going to be joining us, as well as Director of Marketing and Social Media for golftrainingaids.com, Emily Faulkner. So let me welcome both of them to the show, and we'll have a conversation about Golf Training Aids. Good evening, guys, and welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing very well. Emily and Dane, thank you very much for joining me on the show. And if you don't mind, Dane, I'm going to just start with you briefly, and then Emily, I'm going to bring you in as well. So just hang tight. So Dane, what I wanted to do first off is give both of you an opportunity. Just talk about what drew you to golf to begin with. Before we get into the golf training aids and the business side of things, what was your first recollection or memory of golf?
So I grew up in a golf family. My dad, when we moved to Florida in 1972, was director of education for PGA of America, and I grew up with a golf club in my hand. He was an avid collector and still has a large historical collection, and so golf is just something that I was around me all the time from day one. And my first memories were, that were vivid memories, were following along with my dad, and the rule was if I could keep up, I could come. So, as a kid, I loved just taking I would just take a club and you hit it, and as long as that theme kind of continued on into my adult life, that he always wanted to keep the pace of play, fairly quick. But when I was growing up so we're here in Florida, North Palm Beach, Florida. / Palm Beach Gardens, Jupiter, people kind of know that area, West Palm Beach. And he started in the early 70s a golf camp, maybe 76 or maybe his mid 70s. He started one of the actually the first international junior camp that was values-based. So a precursor to First Tee. This is down in Boca at Boca West Country Club, and we would stay there. We had campers that would come in. We stayed in the dorms at the school, and we lived golf literally from 6:30 in the morning. We'd get up and run or swim, and then we would go and we would do intramural sports. We would do golf all day. We would end the night by watching films and taking tests and, talking about golf with all the campers, and the staff that they brought in were, phenomenal instructors. I mean, world-class instructors, Charlie Epps, Craig Shankland, a lot of guys that came in even internationally. And it was a great experience. So that's how I really got, I feel like that was my introduction to golf, was with the PGA Junior Golf Academy in the 70s. And I lived golf for a whole summer, 8 weeks. It was great. That was my introduction. And I have to just say one comment about that led forward in case, we don't cover it later, but I ended up coaching at First Tee as a First Tee coach for, 4.5 years or so. Mainly because I enjoyed my experience as a camper so much and had so much fun as a junior player at camp that I wanted to be able to impart that to some of the players and participants at First Tee, was just to share the joy and the fun of going out and playing. Yeah,
and it really boils down to, well said, that's what we want the experience to be in golf, is fun. We want everybody to get out there and enjoy themselves. Whether they, are slicing it into trees sometimes. I mean, that's going to happen to even the best of us. Occasionally we're going to hit some bad shots. But ultimately we want them to have fun. And we're going to talk about some things that hopefully will help them make them a little bit better. Emily, I want to go to you. Now, I'm obviously, and we can talk a little bit about that as we go along. Obviously, you played Division I collegiate golf and had a successful career there. But let's dial it back a few years prior to that and go way back to your first memories of golf.
Yeah, so I am actually from South Florida originally, and I have played golf since I was 3 years old. So my family pretty much born and raised up in Palm Beach, Jupiter area, which everyone knows is, golfer's paradise. And my family lived on the golf course, and my dad would take me out, and I absolutely loved it. I got involved in junior camps. I would play every single day. But since I could remember, probably around 3 years old, I played and started playing tournaments about age 5 and traveling with my parents. And I have a couple little sisters, too, and they got involved in the game. So it was like a whole family dynamic of us traveling, and I just loved all the people I got to meet. And so I've played for many years, but I love the game and everything it's brought
and you
me.
were right. You were, as I mentioned, you were a Division I collegiate golfer at Florida Atlantic University, is where you played.
Yes.
And you had a successful junior career, which included twice earning the South Florida PGA Player of the Year honors. So you were quite an accomplished player, and it's interesting because before you came on, I was talking about my Tuesday show, and we, the Women of Golf, and we talked to a lot of the young up-and-comers on the Epson Tour, which formerly was the Symetra Tour. And, many of them have gone through a similar experience as you, is where they've started very young and then they got into collegiate, and now they're, battling it out on the bigger tours, trying to play against some of the best in the world. And they all have a very similar story to yours, as they grew up around the game, whether it was their dad or other family members that got into them. But what's interesting is you not only played golf, but now you're sort of in the business side of golf and taking it a step further. You obviously, we're going to talk about that here in just a few moments, but Dane, I want to come back to you real quick and talk about Golf Training Aids. Who founded Golf Training Aids? What was the original concept? I know the answer, but I want you to share it with the audience.
Yeah. Again, when I say I grew up in a golf family, I'm really talking about my dad. My dad's Dr. Gary Wiren. He wrote the PGA teaching manual, which was used to train golf pros, to become golf pros. That was the standard and the standard for PGA of America at the time. But going back to when we moved here, he was sort of he was ahead of his time on a lot of things. He has, these drawings for the original PGA Learning Center, the original concepts for that. A lot of people don't know that he created the continuing education credits that are mandated by the PGA. He wanted people to continue their education, and that wasn't part of becoming, maintaining your status as a pro at the time. Mm-hmm. He helped create the Herb Graffis Award. He helped create the Bill Strasbaugh Award. He was involved in a lot of things, the rules committees, and the fact that he helped establish those, the training sessions for those. Anyway, he did a lot of things as a pioneer in the 70s and early 80s. Again, ahead of his time on a lot of things, but he founded the company, and the way that the company actually started was he was tasked by the PGA of America in the 70s to go figure out how do pros teach. Because, again, this is pre-fax, really pre-anything. A lot of mail and some phone calls and stuff, and he would travel to different sections, the Gateway section, the Met section, Pacific Northwest section, and find out what pros were saying and how they were teaching, and then reported back to the PGA, and then, as Director of Education and then later Director of Research and Learning, he sort of tried to bring all this together, and he was the one that tried to standardize how we talk about golf instruction. And along the way, while he was talking to different teachers, one of the things that he found nearly universally was that the better teachers tended to use products that were useful in helping students understand a concept, a swing concept, and to understand a feel. So whether it was position, at the top of the swing, whether it was position at impact, whether it was hip action, whatever it was, they found that they were all using tools of some kind to provide feedback to the players. So the players, when they were doing something, they got feedback if they were doing it right or if they weren't. And so the way that the company started was really the pros would come up and show my dad the product that they used to fix Mrs. Jones's overswing or to fix Bill's slice or whatever, and they would show him, and he would go to the next section, and he would say, hey, if you want to get creative in your teaching, here's some ideas and things you can use to make teaching faster, easier, more effective, and make it more fun when you're out, teaching, because everybody wants to get better faster. And pros would call us, and that carried on into the early 80s, and finally in 1984, we actually incorporated as a formalized the company and incorporated in 1984 to be the forum for the place where pros get their golf training aids. That's how it all started.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're exactly right. I mean, as a teacher professional, you have sort of the tools of the trade, if you will, and you want to be able to articulate. Sometimes words are not enough. Sometimes the players, and I'm talking about your amateur students and players, need some sort of either a visual feedback or a feel to help them understand certain parts of the golf swing. So training aids have become very, very useful over the years, and there's been a variety of them, and there's, thousands upon thousands of them. I think they'd probably circle the globe if you stack them end to end, how many have come out over the years. But they've all played a useful purpose for a variety of different parts of the game. So, Emily, this brings me to you. As a serious golfer, I would certainly imagine prior to getting involved with golftrainingaids.com that you used a variety of training aids yourself to help your game. So what did you look for? Okay, what did you look for when selecting a product for you to use personally?
So when I was growing up, I probably started using training aids probably around age 6, 7, and I've used plenty over the years, but some of my favorites that we still carry and I use for years, still to this day use when I'm practicing, is the Impact Bag, founded by Gary Wiren. Love that one. The power swing fan. The power swing fan I actually used probably when I was competing at my highest level, and I won and played for the U.S. World Cup representing the United States, and it helps me gain 30 yards just from warming up and practicing with it every day. So I've sworn by training aids. It's, I love being able to share on my platform too about how much they can help different players at all levels.
Yeah, and that's important. And I want to just ask a follow-up, Emily, if I can, with you, is when I look at a lot of amateur players, I mean, many of them have tried a lot of training aids, but I don't think they sometimes fully understand the benefits. They look at it and say, okay, well, I got to swing this, and they don't really go through the process. And the reason why I bring this up is this past December, I attended the LPGA's Q Series, the final stages of it, and witnessed many of the girls utilizing a lot of different training aids. And it was like a ritual. Every morning they'd get up there and they'd get on the practice tee before their rounds, and they would, whether it be on the putting surface or it be something up on the actual range when they were hitting balls, but they were very methodical about what they do. I think sometimes a lot of amateurs go out and they purchase these training aids and they don't really fully understand or grasp the purpose or understand how to use them correctly. So what is it that we can do as professionals? I mean, we can obviously show them in that, but is there something that we should be doing as an industry, I guess is a better way to put it, to help them understand the benefits? Like you mentioned, the impact bag. I mean, that's been around for a long, long time. A lot of teaching pros have used that, and it's very effective for feedback and also for practicing. But is there something that we can do to help people understand the benefits of a training aid and how to best get use out of it?
Yes, I think that's something Golf Training Aids is definitely focused on as a company, even over the last year since I started working for the company. Is I know growing up and just, when I hear about a certain training aid, I'll look at it and not have any idea what to do with it. Someone will be like, okay, this will help you. You may be able to hit farther, but you won't know how to set it up. You might really not grasp the whole, concept of why you should be playing and practicing with this training aid. But I think something we focused on, and I think it's really helped, is, creating a lot of different content and videos and pictures to show different players, and even pros, have been sharing different photos and videos. But something like I focus on doing is creating 10-second videos, just here's the training aid, I'm setting it up, here's what you do, or this is how many times you should swing or putt with it a day, and this is what's going to happen. I think that's something, that's really important. A lot of players, too, are visual players, and that's something, I've always relied on. I've worked with, probably over the years, numerous teaching pros, but no matter what, I was always a visual learner, and I always relied on training aids to really take me to that next level. So I think that's something, to have that content and really be able to explain through that is very important. And I think a lot of pros haven't been able to do that, or at least share that with the different players. But I think that's very helpful.
Right, exactly. And I'm like you. I'm a visual person as well. And, you can explain something to me over the phone until the cows come home. But if I can't see it in action, it's difficult sometimes for me. As I've gotten a little bit older, it comes a little easier. But when I was younger, it was difficult. If somebody said, well, do this, do that, and if I couldn't see it in my mind's eye, I'd have a hard time following. And then once they showed me, it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Dane, I want to come back to you and talk about the overall vision of the company. Obviously, it's not just about selling training aids. As Emily pointed out, it's also about showing them how to use them effectively in that. Is your vision today still the same, or has it changed?
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because it touches on a point that's always been, I feel, a weakness in the training aids industry, and one that we're addressing. And so going back to, talking about the use of the products, I'll just give you, 2 examples that come to mind. We sell a product called the pressure board, It's by Ted Sheftick. And Ted Sheftick's pressure board is designed to try and help players, primarily like with irons, they're trying to, when they come into impact, get their weight left. And if you've watched any videos from like Martin Chuck or, Eric Caborno or any of these guys that are teaching and great online instruction, you're going to find that that's one of the differences that better players have in order to have good impact conditions and compress the ball well is they're more left at impact than most amateurs, and their divot patterns are more, consistent and precise. So the pressure board, if you were to, it's essentially a teeter-totter board. So imagine a piece of plywood with a board, a piece of wood in the middle, and then it rocks back and forth slightly so that when you're going to come into impact, you press the board left, and then you come in and hit your shot. That's a great example where if somebody just bought that and got it, they'd stand on it, they'd rock back and forth a few times and go, don't get it. Or they'd say, okay, but now what? Or what am I supposed to really be feeling? What's supposed to happen? When's it supposed to happen? And so, Ted and his son Mark have done a great job with when you buy a pressure board, you get access and you watch all these videos of them walking you through the process of what the problem is, what the recommended, procedure is for using the product and how you should, what you should feel and how you should use it over, some period of time. So it could be week 1, week 2, and then with training aids, we were talking about feel. I remember Bruce Fleischer used to come in, and he always loved the swing guide because he'd say, I get to the top of my backswing, and it always felt like I was a little laid off, or it always felt like I was. And the problem was, in order to get the same feel every single time, it's going to change. The way it feels now is going to change to the way it feels at some future point. So training aids will give you a precise way to know where am I, like for real, like where am I at the top of my backswing. And so the feel part is really important. The training part is really important. And that brings me to the other product, which is one that we're launching with a long drive champion, Maurice Allen. He's endorsing a product that we have called the Power Swing Fan. And that is something that Emily mentioned before that added, distance to her drives and everything. And it's one of those ones where, yes, if you just, if you swing it, you'll improve. You get better kinematics, you get better strength and sequencing, and less, you're better at impact, and you're not going to throw it as much. But with Maurice, he's got a whole training program. So when somebody gets a Power Swing Fan, they also get Maurice's training program. So when you ask, what are we doing like for the industry part and has our vision changed, I would say yes, because our focus used to be primarily we worked with golf pros because they were the ones that really just understood and got the products. But now with such good instruction online and so much access to people that can share content both on social media and on YouTube, there's so much more instructional content available, which is really helping, I think, the training aids industry overall, because now people have a better sense of what they should be doing with the products, and we certainly want to give them, with every purchase, a program, a process, what to do when they get it, that kind of thing. That's definitely part of our vision going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's a great lead-in, Dane. Thank you, because I'm going to ask Emily, being our social media expert here. This is Emily has been really has become a big deal for companies now is the utilization of social media in order to get their messages across. So as a social media influencer, you've got close to 350,000 followers on Instagram, and I'm sure others on other platforms as well. But what have you found works best when promoting the products? Is it just a matter of, hey, let me just show you how it's going to work? Utilizing the social media, because I know you're doing that for golf training aids now. What have you found works for you that maybe some of the listeners that maybe golf pros tune into the show as well, as opposed to just, our amateur golfers? What is it they could do by utilizing social media that could help get their message across that you found works for you with golf training aids?
Yes, of course. I think something that I've definitely found, and just showing, over the years how much things have changed over on social media. I think a lot of people were definitely checked out YouTube a lot, and there's, very long videos explaining different training aids. But with social media and how things have changed. It's a lot more focused on fun, exciting videos to watch, 15 seconds, just explaining how to use it, just how easy a lot of these training aids are, and really getting people to, really want to pay attention to your videos. And also, too, something that we focused on is using different influencers and different pros with large followings, and we always set them up with different discount codes and links to make it really easy to just go to our website, and a lot of different companies do that as well, and I've definitely found that's very useful and really easy for different people to check out our website.
Right, and would you agree too, Emily, that I think what people are looking for is engagement. It's not just a matter of watching it, but they want to feel like there's a way that they can engage with the social media net platform or the company that's representing on the platform. So I think it's just important not just to throw a bunch of videos up, but also have them engaging somehow. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. We have a ambassador program, and I set them up with all the codes and everything, and I try to talk to a lot of the different people on the team almost every single day, just so they feel engaged and they feel like they're part of something, which I think is very important. Instead of, I see it all the time with different companies, and, they'll send over a link, oh, you can join our ambassador program, try to promote, our company, but really they'll never check back in with people after that. So I think that's something that's very important. We have a pro program, and we talk to them all the time. We send emails to just those pros, and they definitely feel like they're part of something, which I think is very important.
I think if you're coming out on social media and you're representing a brand or a number of brands, because really in your case with Golf Training Aids, it's not just the company that you're representing, but companies within the company that are presenting their products and that on Golf Training Aids. So you want to make sure that that they're getting represented, in a way that is engaging to the audience, and people are going to say, hey, that looks like a great product. I'm going to go to their website, golftrainingaids.com, and I'm going to purchase that because it looks like it's going to be something that I need. So the engagement is good, not just for the buyer, but also for the companies that have their products on golftrainingaids.com. Dane, I want to come back to you because this is a question I think that I'm sure a lot of people would want to know. You have a variety of, I don't know how many products, but I know you got a lot of products on the website, and you're continually going to be adding to it and that. But how do you vet? Because, as I mentioned very early on, there are a lot of training aids out there and products that help the golfer, isolate areas of the swing. Do you vet a lot of the products? If somebody comes to you tomorrow and says, okay, we've got a great product, we'd like to partner up with you guys and have it on the site and so on and so forth, do you go through a process to vet them to make sure that you're representing the highest quality that's available out there?
Sure, and you said a key word there, and I think that brings us into the new direction and specifically the new ownership of the company. I know originally you were going to be talking to John Diulis, and John, was the one who identified our company as a company that had a great opportunity for growth, from the sense that we were essentially a mom and pop, a family business that had been in business. We've been in business for 36 years now. We incorporated in 1984, so 30 coming up on 37 years. I've been there 31 years. And, I was very comfortable with my role, being a small business owner and selling, to golf pros and people and whoever. But really what John brought and saw was he brought a new, I guess, mindset for how we were going to do things, which is he's, I don't want to say a perfectionist, but he likes things done the right way. And he knows he has a clear vision for what he wants out of the company and what this company can do and what it can bring to the golfing, public and the market. And so the quality part of it is he wants to make things easy for the customer. He wants to have products available. He wants to have a good experience. And so part of what I've seen in this transition period, over the last 7 months, is his commitment to having good partnerships with good vendors, right? So the products themselves, like we're just going to be working with launching a new larger golf net with the company Spornia, and they've been a great partner for us. The whole starting point for any of these products is the quality of the product, because you can't have a product that's going to sell long term. You can have a product that can sell for 3 to 6 months, but you can't have a sustainable product that's going to sell long term, and you can't have a brand that's going to last long, going to be long term if you don't have the quality. So Spornia was a good example where their focus is, we need, this is what we're looking for. This is what we need. We want to produce a good quality golf net, and we want to make the best one, and that's what's going to make us. That's what's going to make create the demand, is the quality. Divot board would be another great partner that we have. The divot board is that's one of those ones where that vendor is such a key part of what we do, because he stands behind the product. If there's ever any issue, which is very rare, if there's ever any issue, any problem, it's immediate. Okay, he had one thing where if there was some issue, he'd send 2 out to the person just to make sure that everybody's happy and people love the product. So things like that, I think that's been a really key part of our growth and where we're going, is to have good partnerships with good vendors, and then all the rest of it as far as vetting the products. Yes, absolutely, it's a competitive marketplace, but we know how to identify what products are going to be cost effective, durable. If they're going to be, if people, one of the key metrics, this is overlooked by a lot of people, but one I always keep in mind is how likely are they to actually be used by the player, right? It doesn't do anyone any good for them to be in a closet somewhere. Again, going back to the power fan, one of the reasons people like it is because it just sits there, and you could be watching TV or walking in the house. You're going to pick it up and swing it. So divot board is another one. Like, throw it down, practice in your house. So we're a fan of products that you can use at home and in the office, but again, the quality, but the likelihood of use is really a key thing for us, because that's what's going to motivate people to practice, and that's what ultimately is going to help them with their game.
Yeah, and Emily, I want to sort of play off of what Dane just said, because as we've all been going through this pandemic now for a couple of years. A lot of people were, forced to stay at home and, had the excuse, well, I couldn't get out to the golf course in certain areas of the country, and they didn't know what to do and how to, to be involved with their game. So training aids are really a great opportunity, but as Dane said, they're sitting in a closet or, so they need to be effective products. So what I want to ask you is, I think this is given what we've just gone through and the fact that a lot of people, their time is very precious to them. They don't always have a chance to go out to the golf course. So do you see, as time goes on, maybe showing some of these products more at home, so that for people that may be busy executives that don't have a lot of time to get to the golf course, showing and utilizing certain products that they can do right at home? What are your thoughts, Emily?
Of course, yes. Unfortunately, with everything with the pandemic, the last few years, things have changed for people's lives. A lot of golf courses are closed, even in South Florida, where people thought things were a lot better, but even there's a time things are closed. And I was actually in college at Alabama. Everything was closed, and I was putting on my putting mat every single day, and using different training aids that I could use in my backyard or right inside. And I think the pandemic, as unfortunate it was, and, the time for everyone, I think it got a lot more people involved in the game that wouldn't have played golf before. And it also allowed a lot more people to use training aids, use different practice tools inside and at home, different nets that they wouldn't be using before. And I think something, too, that it really allowed people that didn't have a lot of time before, because even growing up, on days I couldn't get to the course, or days I was at school all day, I would put aside 30 minutes. I would time myself, or have my parents time me and be like, okay, I'm going to practice this 6-foot putt or 8-foot putt for 30 minutes. And I would do that all the time, or I would swing my power swing fan 100 times that day. So I think those training aids that you're able to use at home, no matter how busy you are with work or school, a lot of different college players, I think that is able to really allow players to get to another level, and definitely has changed the world of golf. But I think that's where training aids definitely come in.
And let me follow up one more question with you, Emily, and then Dane, I'll come back to you. Because you've used, and as a player, you've used training aids yourself and that, typically what's sort of a benchmark that you use as far as the effectiveness? So, again, people have very limited time. When you look at a training aid for yourself, what typically is the amount of time that you think is sufficient practice time is what I'm looking at, that they're going to get the maximum benefit out? Now, obviously, they're going to have to do it multiple times over a period of time, but is 10 minutes a reasonable amount of time that they're going to benefit from using whatever the practice training aid might be, or do they typically need to use it a little bit longer at any given session? What is your recommendation from your experience?
Yes, I think a little bit longer than that. I don't think that would be enough time. I think between 30, 45 minutes a day would be best, and on days that you have a little bit longer time, maybe an hour, but at least 30 minutes a day for those training aids. I think, no doubt. I don't think 10 minutes, unless it's one maybe to increase distance or, a weighted club like that, then it's just different with every training aid and, the plans and workout programs for sure. So it definitely varies. But I think at least 30 minutes for if it's putting or, something else. But I think for the ones that are more swing-related and distant, I would try to put a number on it and increase it, as time goes on. I think that's something with Maurice Allen, and when we launch the program, it's going to be very exciting. It's a week-by-week program, and I think people will be able to see as time goes on how much distance is increased. So I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, I agree.
I think minutes a day.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think 30 minutes is reasonable. Obviously, more depending on the training aids. Some might require you to commit a little bit more time to get the full benefit out of it. But I think at least 30 minutes. And obviously, something is better than nothing. We would rather, I think, as a golf professional, I think I would rather have students, be doing something than nothing. But yeah, I would agree with that.
That shows you, Ted, that she's a player, right? Because I'm thinking, 15 minutes, right, is good. But if you're a player, then it's just like somebody that actually is serious about their fitness. You don't go to the gym for a half hour, right? You go a little longer to get to your actual workout in. And Emily knows about that as well.
15 minutes.
Yeah. But absolutely, I think that also brings up a point that's pretty important about the validity and why these low tech training aids can be so effective. Because if they do something specific and they do it well and they don't take a lot of time to get set up, compare that to a lot of the technology that's used today, right? We're talking about the likelihood of use. Well, how many times do people have, I won't name any names, but how many times do they have some technology device, whether it's Bluetooth or whether it's something that's not charged or they got to wait to boot up and then load and enter their date information and then name and get their session going and add the clubs. By the time they're ready to hit balls, it's 15 minutes and their 15 minutes is up that they had for a break. I absolutely think that you can have effective practice when you're talking about motor patterning. You're talking about just repetition of a specific motion. And if you do that, one of the things that's important about it is not just the repetitions, but the repetitions over some time period, right? So you need that time period to ingrain the myelination of your neural pathways to create that muscle memory is just really a pattern that you've created. And you need time to allow your body to develop those pathways and strengthen those pathways. So, if you can do 10 minutes for 3 weeks, it's certainly a lot better. And the last comment about the half hour and longer, I think that one of the great things about training aids, and we talk about people's expectations about what they're going to get out of a training aid, and they expect they're going to pick it up and swing it and it's going to fix their swing. What the real value is are the insights that are gained when you let the training aid teach you, right? So there's this paradox where if somebody doesn't have a problem and they pick up a training aid and they swing it and they don't have some issue or whatever, they feel like it doesn't do anything. And then if they swing it and it feels like it's doing something and it feels terrible, that's because they need it. So that's a paradox. You need to spend the time to let the training aid teach you what it's trying to teach you, and that's where these types of conversations and the online instruction and the rest of the stuff gives people some foresight into the fact that training and changes to your swing take time. They're not going to feel necessarily great, and you need to just let go and listen, to what the training aid's teaching you, and that part takes time.
Yeah, and it's a matter of unlearning some bad mistakes along the way, and a training aid's going to do that, a lot of them. I mean, we see a lot of students coming out to the lesson tee that do some funky-looking things, and, once they start utilizing, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Emily, you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you've seen many, many times, right? And, they're doing all kinds of things, and it's just like, you're not going to get any results.
It's hard to unlearn something, right? So you can really only like strengthen a new thing, and that's with the training aids and the repetition, you can do that. You can absolutely do that.
Right, exactly. And
the
that's
more
what I was
you
getting at.
practice with them, the easier it'll be, no doubt.
Right, exactly. So, Dane, let me ask you, you guys have a new website. You built a new site. And what is going to be different, or what is it that you're going to do? Obviously, you're going to have products on there, but what's sort of the user experience going to be moving forward?
More Emily.
No. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, Emily. Emily, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I think he just meant more.
I meant more Emily. No.
Yes. No.
Oh, okay. Oh, I got you. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Emily works in-house full time, and when you talk about engagement with customers and things like that, like she's on all day with people, just getting back to them, and she's awesome to work with. Very helpful, well, it's true. And so really, she's a key part of us. So with John, one of the things that we have that's different from in the past is we have teams of experts, right? So we have a Facebook person, we have Emily as our marketing person, we have a project manager, we have an Amazon team, we have, the Instagram and TikTok, like ad managers. It's all this stuff. People don't realize this is a real, business venture, and we want to be the best at, and have the broadest reach that we can. So as far as the website goes, that's part of how we reach people. And I'll give my quick comment on the website, and then Emily, she's very involved in that as well as Christian, one of our guys at the office. And by the way, anyone can reach us at Emily at golftrainingaids.com. Christian at golftrainingaids.com, Dane at golftrainingaids.com, and John is in-house full-time, as the director and operations manager of everything that we're doing, and it's been great. It's been a great experience for me to see the opportunity of what we can really do, as an efficient company, with capital to back us up, and we can do things, and it's been great. So the site is going to be. It's more mobile responsive. It's a nice, clean-looking, great site. We're going to have a lot more, products and specials and things. But definitely we're going to be building out a section for women's products. We have a fun and games section that we're developing so that we can, it's not all about just you're fixing your swing. There's a lot of learning that takes place in competitive games. And, that's a lot of fun, too. It's one of my favorite things to do,
and
is have something that's fun and helps you get better. Exactly. Anyway, that's my take on the site. So we have some new stuff on there, but definitely cleaner and faster. Emily, what do you think on the site?
No, I think it looks awesome. I think it definitely gives, a very user-friendly experience, very easy to navigate on. It's made it very easy for pros to sign up on our pro program and also on our ambassador program. I think something that also looks a lot better, too, is the fun and games. And, we have the Chippo net, and a couple of different things, like the range finders we've added. I think, we've just focused on adding a lot more products that people have been asking for, and that our new website really makes it easy for all the, to everyone to get on those products and order from us or want to work with us. Definitely a lot easier for everyone.
When I was talking about the technology part, the technology products that we do have, they're great partners. The reason that we have the ones that we have is because they're so quick and easy to use. You turn them on, you pair them to your phone. We carry the Rapsodo mobile launch monitor, and we carry the Mevo, the basic portable Mevo, and the Mevo Plus. Those are the ones that I think are a great complement. I mean, the instructors are going to use the high-end systems that are, $15,000, $20,000 because that's what they do day in, day out, and they live that. They live those numbers. The technology that we carry, whether it's from the rangefinders or the launch monitors, are the kinds that are the easiest to use and interpret from a user standpoint. So people don't have to be scared about, not understanding the numbers. Those two particular products are fantastic, easy to use. And then on the other sections of the site, it's really mainly just a matter of fleshing out the sections that we have. So the fitness section, the fun and games, like we're going to be adding products. We can get into that a little bit more, but we have some exciting products in the works. But I'll let you lead us into the next topic.
Well, let's go right into that. I know John had mentioned that there are going to be some new things coming down the pike. So if you want to touch on that, and without sharing too many surprises, but leave a little bit of imagination for the listeners, and obviously those that are going to visit the site a bit later. But give us an idea, Dane. What have we got coming down the pike?
Okay, so one of the things you have to realize is that as you said, there's a lot of products out there, right? So we get approached by companies, every day, every week that have, some new idea. They've got some concept or some training aid. And one of the things that my role has changed in the company from, before I sort of did a lot of everything as a small business owner. And one of the luxuries that I've had is that I've been able to be moved into a position where I'm strictly a product development manager, right? So I'm a new products manager and product development manager. And that's exciting for me because people don't know this, but I have the largest archive of golf training aids in the world nobody really who collects training aids other than golf pros have a bag in a closet full of training aids. Right? So a lot of people have 30 training aids, but I have thousands, 5,000 or more training aids. And where I got them all was all the products that were submitted to us. I have one of those products, that I kept, or products that we sold over the last 35 years. Vintage products that I found off eBay, historical products that my dad, collected from the 1920s and 30s. Like I've got all these different training aids. And so one of the exciting things for me was I was always into, just like my dad, as a collector, training aids were my thing to collect. And so I paid a lot of attention to what came out, who did it. I got to know all the vendors, what their story was, how they developed the products. But one of the things that I got to do was I used to fly up to Crystal City every year, and I met with a guy up there named George Marlowe. George Marlowe was the primary examiner. If you look at the class A273 for golf training aids, and you look at any golf training aid, virtually any golf training aid that was patented from, 75 through, or 1970 through 1990, like for 20, 30 years probably, he was the primary examiner for all those products. And I used to meet with him, and I used to be able to go up, not to the little microfiche, but actually up to the shoe boxes where they've got the original patent and original patent applications. And I was fascinated by that stuff to see, because what it allowed you to see was you got to see the evolution. So here I am at the house. My dad's got this extensive historical golf collection. So I'm looking at all the clubs, and I'm looking at all the balls, and I'm looking at the postcards and the sheet music and the clothes. And I'm getting to see this development of the clubs and the balls from the late 1800s all the way through till, when you don't need to collect vintage stuff anymore, 1940s, basically. His collection would run from 1880 to 1940s. And at the same time, go back and look at the patents and see what were people patenting that were golf training aids. And there was a number of golden eras of golf training aid development, in the 1920s and the 1960s, and then the 1990s was sort of the last boom of all these training aids. Because imagine, again, there's not a ton of communication from place to place. So independently, all these people are developing something that they think is the key to a better golf swing and a key to lower scores. So you get to see the evolution of teaching, really, of how what people think is important in the golf swing and how that's taught. You can see in all the patents on the golf training aids. So how does this relate to new products? Well, so one of the things that I've been able to do is go back and revisit all of the products that I have. So not only, you talk about the ones that were patented, but how many, for every patent, there's probably another 100 that weren't patented that were still made. So I'm looking at all these, and I'm able to pick and choose elements of these different products and say, what would be the best laser swing plane trainer? What would be the best weighted club? There's not necessarily one thing that everyone's going to and everyone agrees on that this is the best, system for. And there have been ones that have done well, right, for speed training and things like that. But what the goal is to find fundamentally sound products that a beginner can use, and that an intermediate player can use, or a tour player can use. And there should be some, the products themselves, and then guidance on who they're for, when to use them, how to use them. So that's something that's going to be part of the future of the company, is designing and manufacturing, as well as identifying and partnering with people with not only novel concepts, but also really tried and true classics, if you will, but that, there was no internet 25 years ago for people to go do email marketing and have a broad enough audience. So you had these products that were very good products, but how long can you sustain, a business selling 300 products a year, 500 or what? There's products that now would sell a lot more because they're great concepts and can be made, I think, better. And that's part of what we're going to be doing are things like that, putting mats, but that have some unique features to them that are different than, current putting mats, that have some good training components, a weighted club, laser clubs, things like that. You'll see definitely in the coming months.
Fantastic. I think it's a great business model. Unfortunately, John wasn't able to join us as well tonight. That would have been fun to get his input, but I'm glad that, Dane, you were able to jump on tonight, and I appreciate that and all the information. And let's two things we're going to do is give them the website, and it's golftrainingaids.com. We've been talking about it here for the last close to the last hour. That's where we want to send everybody to get them to check out some of the great products. And Emily, you have an Instagram account that you want to send people to as well. They can see some videos and so forth. Where can they go to get more information?
Yes, it is. My personal one is Golfer Girl M on Instagram, and ours is Golf Training Aids. And you'll be able to see lots of different photos and videos, and we're very excited to have everyone follow us.
Very good. And Emily, I'm going to be reaching out to you after I come back from Pinehurst. John has already sent me the information. I'm the publisher of Golf Tips magazine as well, so I'm looking at maybe getting involved in the ambassador program. So I know that he put me in touch with you. So I don't know if you realized it was the same person or not, but it was me. So I'll reach out to you.
It's me the whole time.
So I didn't know for sure. So anyways, I'll reach out to you. I'm going to be in Pinehurst this weekend, and I'll be back about the middle of next week. So I'll send you. I've got your email. So I'll send you an email. I probably needed a couple of training aids before I head up there, but
are you playing up there? They've got some up there.
I am actually. I'm starting out Saturday. I'm just going to warm up on the cradle, and then number 2 on Sunday, number 4 Monday, and number 9 on Tuesday. Sorry. So
I listened to a little of your interview with Nicole Weller, And I've got to thank you for having us on the show and for doing such a great job over the past 10 years. I mean, when you see, people like Nicole, who's, she's she's been involved in everything, right? I know she was your first guest, and she's just she represents, the best of what teachers, are like in this industry, and I have a lot of respect for her, but also for you for actually creating this forum and giving people an opportunity to hear us talk about what we do. Because but as far as reaching us as well, our phone number. If anyone wants to reach us, they can call and they can talk to me about anything, products, hopefully. Emily, Christian, any of the guys or shipping guys that are there. The number is 800-4-GARY. So that's in honor of my dad, who's still alive and well, 87, still director of instruction at Trump International. So he's still teaching and active, and he's got a passion for golf and wants to, write his final book on finding the joy in the game. That's what he wants to be remembered for. But 800-4-GARY, which is 800-367-4279. That's how people can reach us. And I'm Dane at golftrainingaids.com.
Perfect. And again, golftrainingaids.com is the website to visit. A lot of great products on there. And Golfer Earl M is Emily's Instagram account. You can check out some great videos and photos and so forth there. And thank you guys for joining me on Golf Talk Live. I appreciate it. And I'll have you guys on again when you get ready to launch some new stuff and you're excited to share it. You can come back on and share it with my audience. I'd happy to have you here. So thank you both very much. Have a great weekend. And Emily, I'll be in touch with you next week sometime.
Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Can't wait. Yeah, thanks,
We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye. All right.
All right. That was Dane Wiren and Emily Faulkner from golftrainingaids.com. Thanks, guys, for joining me this evening and sharing a lot about their products, and available on golftrainingaids.com. You want to check them out. It's a great website, a lot of good information there, and hopefully some good products that you can use to help elevate your game a few notches. And again, special thanks to my good friend Pete Buchanan for joining me earlier on the Coach's Corner panel. On that note, again, next Tuesday there will not be a Women of Golf show, but next Thursday there will be another Golf Talk Live with another Coach's Corner panel and an insightful guest interview. I hope you'll join me. God bless everybody, and I'll let you know how I did at Pinehurst next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.